Welcome to another episode of OmenG's Stupid Scary Stories. Today I'm going to try something a little bit different. I have this book. It's called Connecticut Ghost Stories and Legends by Thomas D'Agostino and Arlene Nicholson, part of their Haunted America collection. I'm going to read you a story from it, and I'm going to put my own little spin on it after I'm done. So, let's start, shall we? Seventh Day Baptist Cemetery. The Green Lady. You ready? Alright, let's do this. The Seventh-day Baptist Cemetery is host to an eerie entity called the Green Lady. Unlike most female ghosts that cavort around cloaked in a shimmering white radiance, the Green Lady glows with an emerald sheen. The ghost is said to be the wraith of Elizabeth Palmiter, who died at the age of 30 on April 12, 1800. Circumstances surrounding her tragic demise are lost to antiquity and have become host for legend and speculation. It is surmised that Elizabeth drowned in the swamp next to the graveyard. Some say her husband, Benjamin, was there and did not or could not help her. Other accounts state that her husband had ridden into town to procure some necessities when a bad snowstorm hit. He could not travel in the blinding flurries and decided to wait out the blizzard. Elizabeth got nervous when he had not returned and ventured out in the dead of night to try to find him. During the snowstorm, she got lost and drowned in a nearby swamp. When her husband returned, he found her in the swamp, still clad in her beautiful green dress. Other legends say he actually murdered her and threw her into the muck to cover up his evil deed. No matter what legend you choose to believe is true, the fact is that the Green Lady has been spied wandering the road that runs adjacent to the burial ground for over 2 centuries. Those who witnessed the specter say she is not sad, but on the contrary, has a rather pleasant expression on her face. She is strikingly beautiful, surrounded by a green mist as she meanders down the road where the burial ground is located. Some say, as opposed to a green mist, she appears to be covered in a green slime from the swamp where she had met her unfortunate demise. There are stories circulating that the house next to the graveyard is also haunted. It is believed that the house was once hers. There is a portrait of her that can be seen from the road. Many say that the portrait is also haunted as it watches over those who make their way past the old dwelling toward the cemetery. Whether this part is true or not is a matter of conjecture, but as for the ghost, numerous people have witnessed her midnight ramblings along the old road. Some witnesses have claimed to have also seen the spirit of her husband eternally searching for his lost bride. Members of Connecticut Paranormal Encounters and Research investigated the graveyard, and although they did not capture any EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, they did get what appears to be an anomaly near Elizabeth's grave. A very strange mist, rising and swirling into some sort of form, emanated from her gravesite. The burial ground, consisting of 35 known burials, is mostly stripped of its stones. The Green Lady's stone was replaced, but has disappeared once more. Many others are gone as well. The place is heavily patrolled at night, and the neighbors keep a watchful eye for anyone trying to get into the cemetery during the twilight hours. The property is owned by the New Britain Public Works, so trespassing for any reason other than historic research is prohibited. The Seventh-day Baptists journeyed to Burlington from Rhode Island. Many of them were descendants of the Roger Williams congregation that migrated from the Massachusetts Bay Colony to found the Ocean State. The area was originally called West Britain. The residents established the Seventh-day Baptist Church on September 18, 1780. On October 18, 1796, a man named Jared Covey donated a half-acre of land for the purpose of a public burial ground. This excerpt comes from a book of records for the Seventh-day Baptist Society. It relates a lot about the burial ground's official beginning. At a meeting of the Seventh-day Baptist Society and others holden at the house of Jared Covey on the 12th day of October 1796, made choice of dear Amos Burdick, moderator, and Silas Covey, clerk, voted that the meeting be adjourned to the 9th day of November at 6 o'clock p.m. At the same time, having met agreeable to adjournment, the moderator being absent, made choice of Elisha Covey to lead in said meeting, and whereas Jared Covey presented to the meeting a deed of a piece or parcel of land laying at the southeast corner of the 9th lot in the 4th division in Bristol, containing about half an acre for the purpose of a public burying ground, with this consideration of said society, fencing said land and giving the privilege of pasturing sheep on the same, upon which consideration said meeting as a society accepted the present, whereas it is necessary to have a committee to superintend the fencing of said land, voted that Elias Wilcox be a committee to superintend said business, voted that Elisha Covey take charge of said deed and the records of said meeting, voted to adjourn to the 4th Monday in October, next at 6 o'clock p.m. at the house of Jared Covey. Within this writing are two very interesting points that were pertinent at the time. One is that it was not called a cemetery, but rather a burying ground. The word cemetery did not actually come into our language as a description of a final resting place for our loved ones until the dawn of the 19th century. This came into vogue with the larger, more elegant garden cemeteries that are now prevalent in our society. The other aspect more important to the settlers of the time was the fact that their livestock be allowed to graze on the land despite it being a burial ground. This was quite common throughout New England when land was donated or sold for that purpose. The town folks did not mind all too much either, as they had a built-in landscape crew in the form of sheep and cattle to keep the grass trimmed neatly around the stones. Although this writing dates the official transfer of the land at 1796, the site had been used as a burial ground beginning in 1780 with the burial of John Davis, son of Reverend Davis, pastor of the congregation. John Davis was part of Captain Pettibone's company in the Revolutionary War. He died on December 10, 1780 at the age of 29. Pastor Davis, born September 10, 1723, died at the age of 68 on August 29, 1792. According to one record, he is recorded as having the oldest written stone in the yard. In any case, the deed made it official, and so it was given the name of the Seventh-day Baptists. The Sabbatarians, as they were called, were plagued with strange deaths during the period from 1810 to 1820. One died after falling from a ladder, and another woman was hanged while repairing a lamp in her home. One man died when a recently dug well collapsed on him, and another member was killed when a tree mysteriously fell on him. Although these incidents were labeled as accidents, one must think how such bizarre occurrences could transpire in such a short time. Was the case of the Green Lady a mere accident, or is she still returning to tell someone something? In 1820, the Seventh-day Baptists abandoned their holdings and headed west to Brookfield, New York. Perhaps the strange deaths that plagued the congregation became to them a sign that the land was not as hallowed as they first believed. Upon their hasty departure, the townsfolk of Burlington took over the properties and began burials of their own in a small cemetery. The last recorded interment is that of Charlotte Spencer, who died on October 14th, 1881. The exact whereabouts of the cemetery is not available, but one can find it by asking the Burlington officials and getting permission to visit. Otherwise, these accounts should be enough to state the supernatural appetite. Well, after reading this, of course, I wanted to know more. I was intrigued. Quite intrigued. So one day I set out to find this cemetery. Talked to some of the townsfolk. A lot of hush-hush shit. Nobody really wanted me to know anything. So they kind of said it was this way, it was that way. Giving me all this dumb directions. Nobody wanted to tell me the actual truth. Then I ran into an old lady. She was really old. She looked like she was probably like 100 and something. Old, hunched over, little wrinkled hands, skin hanging off of her and shit. She said to me,
"Sonny, come, I'll tell you what you need to know, what you want to know."
I was a little perplexed because, I didn't say anything to her about anything, so I'm assuming maybe word got back to her that I was looking for the cemetery and the green lady, right? So she sits me down, tells me somewhat some of the story that I just told you. I'm like, yeah, I know. I read, the book. That's why I'm looking, interested, seeing if I can see this green mist or this green lady. So she starts scribbling on this piece of paper, which would turn out to be a rudimentary map. She drew lines and arrows and directions and things, and she handed it to me. And she said, "Beware the voices in the dark." I said, "Okay. Thank you." Turned around to walk out of her house, and I turned back to ask her a question, and when I did, she was gone. Vanished into thin air. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured maybe she just went back in the house, you know what I'm saying? Even though she was like old as shit and probably couldn't move that fast, I didn't think much of it. Just like, she gave me a map, that's nice. So, right, I start reading the map. I'm looking at where I am and stuff, getting all my equipment ready. I remember what she said. Remember, beware the voices in the dark. So I figure, hey, guess what? I'll go during the daytime. Why go at night when shit's scarier? If you're gonna see a ghost, I'm assuming they come out during the day too. Well, why are they only out at night, right? So that's what I'm thinking to myself. They'll probably be out during the daytime. So let me go ahead and see what I can see now while it's still light out. I follow the map, come up to this marsh area. I'm trudging through it, and I'm noticing that the trees are overgrown, and it's dark within this small marshy forest land area, right? And it's when I start to hear whispers. At first, I couldn't really understand what any of them were saying. It was like a bunch of different voices all at once. Like they were having some type of a ghostly conversation amongst themselves that I wasn't part of, obviously. It was an A and B situation, and they told me to see my way the fuck out of it. But I was still confused. So I got out my little recorder and I started recording the sounds that I was hearing. I figured nobody was going to believe me, so I wanted to have evidence of it. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I continued following this map. Continued following it. And I noticed off maybe, let's say, 100 yards away, there was a clearing, right? I saw what looked like an old rock wall of some sort. I kept following this path, and I got to the clearing, right? And I realized something. It was colder than it was when I first had started my journey. Temperature shouldn't have dropped in the clearing because the sun is out, but it was colder, right? And I start looking at these stones, and I realize something. It's not an old rock wall that I'm looking at. I'm looking at old tombstone bases, like, the base that the stone rests on, I guess. Maybe that's how it was. I'm not sure. But I knew that they weren't the remnants of a wall. They were stones for cemetery and burial. I saw one that had been cracked in many places. I saw some words written on it, but I couldn't quite make them out because of how damaged it was. So I had no idea whose grave I was standing on, but I felt kind of weird. I started to back up because I didn't want to be disrespectful. Disrespecting anybody's gravesite and shit. That's a terrible thing to do. If I was a ghost and I was in my grave chilling and shit and somebody's like walking over top of me, I'd kind of be pissed off about it. Probably grab them by the leg and be like, hey, don't do that. You're walking on my shit right now. I'm trying to rest eternally and you're disturbing me. But anyway, as I'm backing up, a whisper is in my ear and it says to me, beware the marsh. Things are not what they seem. I turned around, expecting to see somebody, but I would have heard them walk up, more than likely, because, twigs and sticks and marshy, squishy land makes noise. But I didn't hear anything, and obviously, when I turned around, I didn't see anybody, right? So this really weird feeling came over me, and I decided it was time for me to leave, at least now. Maybe I would decide to come back later at night. So I start walking back through the marsh, and up ahead of me I see a woman, described like in the excerpt there in the book, strikingly beautiful, in a green dress, old-timey looking dress. So I got out my camera and I started taking pictures. But when I looked back at the pictures that I took, there was nothing there. You know what I'm saying? There was no person there. But she was right in front of my face. She looked at me and she smiled. And it was a smile that I'll never forget as long as I live, because it struck fear in my heart. It was like from ear to ear, a grin, sinister in its making, and just terrifying to lay eyes upon. I felt a shiver go down my spine. I didn't want to go back towards the cemetery, but I didn't want to walk past this ghostly woman who, for whatever reason, wasn't showing up on my damn camera. I was kind of angry because I had some proof here. I had some proof, and I could have showed it to people and said, look, I'm not crazy, and the green lady does exist. But that's not what happened. As I stood there staring at this specter, shocked, scared, I felt something grabbing my leg, like a hand, bony, tightly around my ankle, squeezed. I looked down, and I see like a skeleton hand grabbing hold of my leg. I start to shake it and shit, and this thing is strong for a bony skeleton hand, and it starts to pull downward, and another hand comes up and grabs my other leg and starts to pull down. Then multiple hands start coming up out of this marsh and grab me, and they're pulling down, and all the while this specter, this ghost lady, is just sitting there with that evil smile on her face. I start yelling and screaming, obviously, because I'm fucking panicking and shit. I know what's happening is not normal shit. This isn't normal. This type of stuff isn't supposed to fucking happen. I mean, I came out there for it to happen, but I didn't really think that it was gonna happen. I mean, I'm somewhat of a skeptic. when it comes to these things. You know, I don't believe everything that I read just because somebody says it happened. I mean, shit, that's what you investigate for, to find out, are these things true? Are they true? And they are. This one in particular. But she's not happy at all. She's evil. She's evil. She opened her mouth wide, wider than the mouth is supposed to open. I saw rows of sharp teeth, like a shark's mouth. And a scream came forth from her that went right through my whole entire soul. I could feel her pain all of a sudden. In my mind, I could see her demise. She didn't die because she was looking for her husband. No. This is what happened. Her husband was cheating on her, and she found out about it. Now, you know how it was back in those days. Women really didn't have a whole lot of fucking rights. They kind of had to take the shit and deal with it, right? And she was angry and upset, hurt, betrayed. That's all I felt. It's what I felt when she screamed this scream. It pierced my soul. And I saw the last night that she lived, clear as day, right in front of my face. I felt her last night. Finally, having had enough of her husband's supposed trips to town to get things that he would somehow forget to come home with after being gone for 2 and 3 days, she approached him. She said to him, "Hey, Benjamin, what the fuck, man? I've given you my life, my loyalty, my love. And you're sleeping around? Why? Why would you do this to me?" "Shut up, woman." Smack. Hit her. He had never done this to her before. You know what I'm saying? Never. But then she had never questioned him before. What happened next was terrible. He beat her. Like a dog, he beat her. It was windy outside and snowing, stormy weather. He said to her, "If you don't like it here, and you don't like what I do, you can't live with my authority. Question me, woman. You do not. I support you. All you have to do is stay within this house and enjoy the comforts that I afford you. I will not be questioned by you, or any woman for that matter. You don't want to be here. You don't like what I do. We'll leave." She looked at him, crying, tears in her eyes, beaten, bloody, battered. She said, "No, John, no." Well, not John, Benjamin. I think John was his middle name. Either way, "Benjamin, no. No, Benjamin. The storm outside is brutal. I won't make it. I don't want to leave. I just want to understand." He smacked her again, then kicked her on her stomach. Oh. He opened the door to their home, and he threw her out into the weather, into this brutal, cold blizzard. She stumbled, not knowing which way she was going, and ended up in the marsh, where she started to hear the same whispers that I heard. And who did she see? The old woman that I saw. I was fucking floored. And the old woman said to her the same thing she said to me: "Beware the whispers in the dark." Now, of course, because Elizabeth wasn't aware of ghosts or anything of that nature, they didn't believe in stuff like that. You understand what I'm saying? So she didn't take it supernaturally that this old woman was talking about ghosts or anything like that. She figured that the old woman just meant people whispering around in the dark, right? Well, as she's walking along this pathway, along the edge of the marsh, she starts to hear whispers. "Come this way. We'll help you. You shouldn't be out in this cold. Come. There's shelter here. There's shelter. We'll keep you warm." She was hurt, confused, upset, betrayed, thrown out with nothing except the clothes on her back. She didn't know that she shouldn't trust these voices from the darkness. So into the darkness she went, down the same path that I just so happened to be walking on hundreds of years later. And her fate was one that was almost happening to me at the time. From within the soft, marshy grounds, these hands came up. They took hold of her dress and they took hold of her. They dragged her into the mud. You're thinking to yourself, it's wet, but it's cold. There's a blizzard. Shouldn't the ground be frozen? And I was thinking the same exact thing, right? But when you have supernatural forces at play, nothing is what it seems. Nothing is what it seems. So into the mud, they dragged her slowly down until she was under the mud and died. They claimed her soul because of the anger and torment and pain and the trickery in which she had suffered. Her soul did not leave this earth. It was stuck there. But because she was good and wasn't an evil person, her soul roams, torn between enacting vengeance upon men who travel this path or telling them her story to seek, I guess, some sort of closure. Anyway, as I'm fighting with these things and envisioning this stuff that's happening, I break free, finally, and I decide I'm just gonna run at her and try to get away, because where else am I gonna go? Behind me is the cemetery, and I don't want to go back there, so I ran. And as I ran towards her, she turned into the green mist and dissipated. I made my way out back to the roadside. I hopped into my car and I drove away. And I told myself, I'll never go back there again. Never again. There are some places that should be left alone. If you wander into an area and people are not forthcoming with information on how to get there, there's usually a reason for it. And I learned the hard way that place was just not safe. I mean, I can understand her anger and her pain, her want to make men especially suffer as she suffered, tricked as she was tricked into an eternity of damnation. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me for a little bit of a different spin on OmenG's stupid, scary stories. This one being number 39. I hope you enjoy it because I plan on doing something like this a little more often when I don't have any stupid, scary stories to tell you. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful Sunday.